In this Shadowheart build guide, I'm going to be showing you how to play Shadowheart if you don't want to change her Trickery domain subclass, and if you need a good alternative to using Astarion as your rogue. I'll cover ability scores, class features, equipment, and I'll provide tips on how to get the most out of Shadowheart when played this way. Shadowheart can fill the rogue role of the group fairly well, however to do so I'll be multi-classing her with Thief Rogue. Trickery domain clerics and Thief Rogues have a lot of synergy, which I'll be showing you over the course of this video. Let's begin with her ability scores, since this is essentially a pre-made character. Since Shadowheart begins BG3 as a Trickery Cleric, her ability scores are more in line with what a typical cleric would use. However, since we're going to make her into more of a roguish character, you want to respec these eventually with a priority of Dexterity and Wisdom and some Constitution. We won't be using very many hostile cleric spells with this Shadowheart build, so high Wisdom is not necessary, but if you don't have at least 14 Wisdom, you won't be able to prepare 5 spells, and there are about 5 must-have spells for this build, so I don't recommend going lower than that. Shadowheart has proficiency in History, Insight, Religion, and Medicine by default, but none of these are particularly good if you want her to handle the roguish duties of the party. We'll rectify this issue via the Rogue class, but simply taking levels of Rogue won't be good enough, since you only gain 1 skill and expertise in 2 skills when you multi-class into Rogue. However, if you respec Shadowheart and take 1 level of Rogue first, and then take Trickery Domain Cleric second at level 2, you'll get to choose 4 Rogue skills that include Perception, Sleight of Hand, and Stealth, which you'll want. You can then take Expertise in Perception and Sleight of Hand as well, which sets up Shadowheart for success as a roguish character immediately at level 2, while still maintaining her Trickery Domain subclass. After you've respec Shadowheart into 1 level of Rogue, the next 3 levels should be Trickery Domain Cleric in order to gain some spells and class features. I won't list them all here to save time, but I'll just list the relevant ones that really benefit this build. At level 1 of Trickery Domain, the main things you'll want are the spells Guidance, Bless, Sanctuary, and Healing Word. Guidance is a staple in any cleric build because you can use it pretty much limitlessly since it's a cantrip in both dialogue and while exploring. Just remember not to override Pass Without a Trace or enhance ability with it, or you'll waste a spell slot when you have to recast them. Bless is a phenomenal spell and one that's useful pretty much the entire game. It's going to improve the chances of you and your allies to hit enemies as well as save against harmful spells, preventing damage or negative status effects. It requires concentration, but because you'll be hidden much of the time with this build, you should have no issues avoiding damage so that it is not broken. Generally, you'll want to cast this at the beginning of any tough fight. Remember that if you upcast it with a level 2 spell slot, it can bless your entire party. Sanctuary is another spell you'll likely use all game long, and it's a bonus action which is phenomenal. It allows you to prevent one party member from being the target of enemies for 1 round, and you'll use this when one of your party members is in a bad spot. Just remember that if they attack or cast a harmful spell on an enemy, then Sanctuary will wear off, so try to use it on party members who have already taken their turn, or ones that are incapacitated or surrounded. And lastly, Healing Word is a small heal but can be cast as a bonus action and from great range. Its primary function is to pick up downed allies without having to walk over to them and use the help action, so save it for those cases. Being able to still do this with Shadowheart and be a rogue is great. At level 3 of Trickery Domain, Shadowheart will gain level 2 spell slots and 2 amazing spells, Pass Without a Trace and Enhance Ability. Pass Without a Trace grants her and all nearby party members plus 10 to stealth checks until long rest as long as she maintains concentration. This makes it nearly impossible for her to fail a stealth check, even if she has disadvantage. Enhance Ability is a spell she'll use outside of combat to grant herself or another party member advantage on ability checks from one ability while she maintains concentration. This means you won't be able to use it and Guidance at the same time unless you're getting Guidance from another character, but that you can use it for Charisma checks or for Wisdom checks that include Perception and Survival to help you spot things. From here onward, she will typically progress as a rogue, taking the Thief subclass all the way up to level 12, so let's look at what she gains from that. At level 1 of Rogue, besides the skill Shadowheart will pick up, she'll also gain Sneak Attack. This will continue to get stronger at every odd level of Rogue, capping out at 5d6 at Rogue level 9. You want to use this every turn if you can. At level 2 of Rogue, she'll gain Cunning Action, allowing her to hide as a bonus action. This means she can move, hide, and then sneak attack easily on pretty much every turn. If you prefer to go 2 levels of Rogue before taking 3 levels of Trickery Cleric just to gain this, that is also not a bad option. At level 3 of Rogue, she'll become a Thief, granting her a second bonus action each turn in combat. This is huge because now she can hide, sneak attack, hide, or she can cast Healing Word, hide, sneak attack, or use Sanctuary, then hide, then sneak attack, or use Bless and then Spiritual Weapon and then hide. There are tons of combinations with these 2 classes. At level 4 of Rogue, she'll gain a Feat. I highly recommend ability improvement for Dexterity at this point to further boost her accuracy and damage. Once she gets some better gear later on, Sharpshooter will be a good feat to take and will be a lot easier to use. I want to make a note here that you can go 4 levels of Trickery Cleric at this point, to pick up another feat if you want. It will slow down your sneak attack damage progression, but the feat might be worth it. At level 8 of Rogue, she'll pick up her second feat, and I recommend taking Sharpshooter here for further damage. Should have good accuracy since you have advantage on nearly all of your sneak attacks, your proficiency will have improved, and you'll probably have a +2 weapon to help improve this even further. And if she is using hand crossbows, the Sharpshooter feat will apply to both attacks made with her hand crossbows. Sneak attack will max out for this build at level 9 of Rogue, and you will gain Supreme Sneak, allowing you to turn invisible once per short rest. You may decide this is not worth costing yourself 1 feat and take a 4th level Trickery Cleric instead if you want. The choice is up to you. Since Shadowheart is a rogue cleric multiclass and a half-elf, she has proficiency in a wide variety of equipment, including light and medium armor as well as shields. However, since we're primarily focused on making her a ranged damage dealer for this build, we'll focus there. She has proficiency with light crossbows, short bows, and hand crossbows, so these are really your options. Of these, hand crossbows are the best choice, particularly since she is a thief who can hide and then attack with main hand and offhand in the same turn, or simply attack with main and offhand and then hide if the target is standing near a friendly. If you don't have good hand crossbows or want more range, short bow is a good choice, and there are some decent ones early on in the game. If you manage to get the gloves of archery in the goblin camp, then she could also use a longbow. I like one hand and shield for her melee setup to give her more armor class, especially since we're not trying to melee with our bonus action. However, you could play dual wield if you prefer. A rapier or short sword is probably the best choice of finesse weapon, but don't be afraid to equip something with other benefits even if you don't have proficiency, since we're trying not to melee at all if possible. For chest armor, she'll use light or medium armor, but just make sure that if she is using medium armor, it doesn't give her disadvantage on stealth checks if you use it. I like Yuan Ti Scale Mail a lot, and you can find this at the Last Light Inn, or you can use the Spider Silk armor, which is a light armor if you killed Minthara. I also like Boots of Striding here, as they prevent her from being knocked prone or moved against her will. Gloves of Archery are a must if you want to use a longbow, but otherwise you could probably use something like Gloves of Dexterity and Dump Dexterity if no one else in your party are using them. Or Gloves of Missile Snaring to pull projectiles out of the air when you cannot get back into stealth. Warped Headband of Intellect is good for skill checks, but you won't really need it otherwise. You could also use anything that bolsters stealth or saving throws, like Dark Justiciar Helmet. For accessories, Strange Conduit Ring is a great addition to this build since Shadowheart will always be concentrating on something, and this can further boost her damage. Caustic Band is also good to boost damage as well. Amulet of the Harpers is a good choice should she ever be targeted, allowing her to improve her armor class, and Amulet of Restoration is also good for more healing and access to mass healing word. Final tips. The general strategy with this build is to go into a fight and buff your party with Bless on turn 1 in order to improve hit chance and saving throws. You'll then either summon a spiritual weapon if you want, or attack with your offhand once if you're using a hand crossbow, and then hide. The idea is that you will always try to hide at the end of your turn if possible. Turn 2, you'll begin sneak attacking, trying to pick off the best target for you. These are usually the squishies in the back, but you might be able to finish off a weakened melee unit from the previous turn, so assess and prioritize things you can outright kill. Then either buff a party member with Sanctuary and go back in stealth. You'll deal nearly the same amount of sneak attack damage as a pure rogue with this setup, but you can also buff and support your group at the same time, as well as handle utility functions outside of combat, and you'll be able to do so effectively from level 6 onwards. Note that this build plays relatively the same between levels 6 and 12, since you mostly gain passive increases to sneak attack damage, as well as a few other rogue class passives. And lastly, remember that you can go 8 levels of rogue and 4 levels of cleric with this build to gain an extra feat and another level 2 spell slot in exchange for losing 1d6 of sneak attack damage and supreme sneak. Choice is up to you, and you can try either and see what you like better. So that wraps up our Shadowheart guide. This is the first of our companion builds. We'll probably be putting these out over the next couple weeks. I really love that Shadowheart can fulfill the sort of rogue utility function in the group because of her trickery domain background. Pass Without a Trace is so huge. It makes it so she basically has to roll a 1 and roll a critical miss in order to fail at a stealth check or walk right up to an enemy, and that really puts her ahead, in my opinion, of a pure thief in terms of the stealthiness of this character. On top of that, the way we're set up, she's also able to maintain a lot of the utility functions that she would normally have from playing a cleric, like guidance, like healing word, like bless, all the things that a cleric would typically do in combat. She's able to do most of those things while still adding a lot of damage with sneak attack. As always, if you have tips for newer players, please leave them in the comments below, and if you have questions, do the same, and I will try and answer them as soon as I can.